The whiskey glass tilted in Matteo Vitale's hand, and he didn't notice. He was looking at the woman 3 rows back, at the way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, the same exact motion, the same exact angle, a gesture he had cataloged in his memory so many times over the last 2 years that he sometimes saw it in strangers on the street and had to look away. He had stopped looking away tonight. The cabin lights of the private jet were low, the engines humming somewhere beneath the floor, and somewhere over Pennsylvania a woman who had been declared dead, whose funeral he had paid for, whose empty casket he had personally selected, was sitting in seat 4C reading a paperback like the last 2 years had never happened. His tattooed hand, the ink running from his knuckles to his wrist, old and dark and his alone, set the glass down without him deciding to. If you've ever loved someone enough to let them disappear, stay with me. Because what happens at 31,000 feet is about to undo everything he thought he understood about loss. He stood, slowly. Enzo, beside him, followed his eyeline and went very still. Matteo, Enzo said quietly. That's not possible. Matteo didn't answer. He was already walking down the aisle. He didn't know yet what he was about to find around her neck. But he was about to. 2 years ago, Matteo Vitale had been a different kind of man. Not softer, exactly, but unguarded in the specific way people are before they understand what they have to lose. He had met Naomi Hale at a building dedication in New York. She was the structural engineer who had quietly corrected an error in his architect's plans that would have collapsed a stairwell within a decade, and she had done it without making anyone feel small. He had asked her to dinner that night. She had said no. He had asked again the following week, and the week after that, until she finally said, "You're persistent for a man who could have anyone." "I don't want anyone," he'd said. "I noticed you." They were married 11 months later, in the gardens of his estate in Litchfield, Connecticut, small, quiet, exactly what she wanted. He had the rings made himself, simple platinum bands, his engraved with her initials on the inside, hers with his. "So you're always with me," he'd said, sliding it onto her finger, "even when I'm not." She had laughed and cried at the same time. He remembered thinking, that night, that he had finally built something Victor Lang could never touch. He was wrong about that. And the night he found out just how wrong was the night everything ended. It happened on a Tuesday. Naomi had been driving back from her sister's house in Massachusetts when her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Vitale," the voice said. "Pleasant. Patient. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I know your husband's family owes a debt that goes back 30 years, and I know exactly how to collect it. You have 2 choices. You disappear completely. Tonight, no contact, ever, and he never finds out what almost happened to him. Or you tell him about this call, and within a week, one of you won't be alive to regret it." Victor Lang. She didn't know the name yet. She only knew the voice was not bluffing, the way some voices simply aren't. She pulled over on a coastal road in Massachusetts, hands shaking on the wheel, and she made a choice in under 4 minutes that would cost her 2 years of her life. She left her car at the edge of a ravine, doors open, purse on the seat. She walked 3 miles to a bus station with nothing but the clothes on her back and the ring on her hand, which she immediately moved to a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her collar, where it would never be seen and never be removed. Matteo buried a casket 11 days later. There was nothing inside it. He didn't find that out for 2 years. The official report said accident. Matteo never accepted it, not for a single day. He hired James Calloway, the best private investigator on the East Coast, and gave him one instruction: find her. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. 2 years. Calloway chased 11 false leads across 6 states. Enzo ran the company while Matteo ran himself into the ground, sleeping 4 hours a night, refusing every introduction his mother's friends arranged, keeping Naomi's side of the closet exactly as she'd left it. People called it grief. Enzo called it something else. A man who simply refused to finish a sentence he hadn't said goodbye to. "You have to consider that she's gone, Matteo," Enzo said once, carefully, after 18 months. "I considered it," Matteo said, "for one night. Then I stopped, because it felt wrong. Not sad. Wrong. Like a fact that didn't fit the shape of the world." He kept her ring's matching band on a chain of his own, not worn, just carried, in his jacket pocket every single day. Tonight, he was flying to Los Angeles for a deal that no longer mattered to him in the slightest. He almost didn't take this flight. If he hadn't, he would never have walked past seat 4C. For 2 years, Naomi Hale had been Mara Whitfield, a name she'd chosen off a mailbox in a small coastal town in Massachusetts, the kind of place where nobody asked questions if you worked hard and kept your head down. She worked at a bakery. She was good at it. Precise, the way an engineer is precise, measuring flour like it mattered, because everything matching was the only thing keeping her upright. She never took off the ring. It lived against her sternum, warm from her own skin, and some nights she would hold it and think about a man in Connecticut who had no idea she was alive, and that thought was the loneliest one she owned. She watched him sometimes, on the bakery's small television, in business news segments, thinner than she remembered, harder around the eyes. She told herself it was working. He was safe. That was the whole point. Then, 3 days ago, a man had come into the bakery and ordered coffee and paid with a card that had, for half a second, flashed a name she recognized from somewhere she'd buried along with everything else. She didn't wait to find out if it was nothing. She packed one bag, used the last of her saved cash for a last-minute charter seat out of New York, and told herself it was just precaution. She had no idea whose jet she had just boarded. Matteo stopped beside seat 4C. For a long moment, he said nothing, because there was nothing in 2 years of imagined reunions that had prepared him for this being real. She looked up from the paperback. Her face went through every stage of disbelief in under 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, terror, and something underneath all of it that looked almost like relief, fighting its way to the surface against everything telling her to run. Matteo, she said. Just his name. The sound of it in her voice nearly took his legs out from under him. You're alive, he said. Not a question. A fact he was still in the process of believing. I can explain. You're alive, he said again, lower, like the words needed saying twice before they'd hold. Enzo had stopped the other passengers from approaching. A quiet word, a raised hand. And for one suspended moment, it was just the two of them in a narrow aisle at 31,000 feet. 2 years of silence collapsing into the 3 feet of space between them. Her hand moved, instinctively, the way hands move toward the things that matter most when everything else is falling apart, to her collar. And Matteo watched her pull out a thin chain. And on it, catching the cabin light, was a ring he recognized instantly. It was his ring, the one he'd had engraved with her initials, the one he had buried, in his mind, along with her, except it wasn't buried. It had been against her heart for 2 years, every single day, through every name change and every quiet shift she'd worked, and every night she'd told herself she was protecting him by staying gone. I never took it off, she said, and her voice broke on the last word. Not once. Not for 2 years. I couldn't make myself. Tell me, he said. Not a demand. A man finally getting to ask the question he'd carried for 700 days. So she told him. About the phone call. About Victor Lang's voice and the 4 minutes on a coastal road and a choice that had felt like the only one that didn't end with him in a casket instead of an empty one. You let me bury you, he said, and it wasn't anger. It was something rawer, the sound of a man recalculating 2 years of grief into 2 years of a love so large it had been willing to disappear entirely just to keep him safe. I would do it again, she said. I will always. The satellite phone in Enzo's jacket began to ring. Enzo looked at the screen. His expression changed completely. Matteo, he said. It's about Lang. He knows she's alive. And he knows exactly which flight she's on. The call was from James Calloway, the investigator who had never stopped. Even after Matteo quietly redirected his retainer 8 months ago toward cold cases that felt more like superstition than strategy. I found something 3 days ago, Calloway said, his voice tight over the speaker. A flagged transaction. Lang's people pulled banking records on a Mara Whitfield in coastal Massachusetts last week. I didn't know who that was until 20 minutes ago, when I cross-referenced the charter manifest for tonight's flight. The cabin felt suddenly smaller. Naomi's hand found the ring at her throat and closed around it. He's been looking for her this whole time, she said. Not to hurt me. To use me. To prove to you he could reach into your life again and take what mattered, whenever he wanted. Matteo's expression did something Enzo had not seen in 2 years. It went completely, dangerously calm. Where is Lang now? He asked Calloway. Los Angeles, Calloway said. Waiting for this flight to land. He doesn't know you're already aware. He thinks he's about to deliver you the worst night of your life. Matteo looked at Naomi, at the ring in her hand, at the 2 years written into the careful way she still hadn't fully believed she was allowed to be found. He's about to be very wrong about that, Matteo said quietly. And outside the cabin windows, the lights of Los Angeles were already rising into view. Victor Lang was waiting in a private terminal lounge in Los Angeles with the particular confidence of a man who believed he still held every card. He had spent 2 years dropping breadcrumbs, small, deniable, designed to remind Matteo Vitale that nothing was ever truly finished. What he didn't know was that 2 years of Matteo's grief had quietly funded something else entirely. 18 months of Calloway's investigation hadn't just searched for Naomi. It had built, piece by piece, an airtight case connecting Lang to 3 federal investigations he believed were dormant. When Lang's car was met on the tarmac, not by Matteo, but by federal agents holding documents Calloway had compiled, his confidence lasted exactly as long as it took to read the first page. Matteo never had to say a word to him. He watched from the jet's window, Naomi's hand in his, as 2 years of quiet, patient, devastating precision finally closed around the man who had taken her from him. "Is it over?" Naomi asked. "It's over," Matteo said. He reached into his jacket, the pocket where he had carried his own matching ring for 2 years, every single day, without ever putting it back on, and held it in his palm. "I never took mine off either," he said. "I just stopped wearing it where anyone could see." Some things, it turns out, survived 2 years of silence completely unchanged. They didn't fly back to Connecticut that night. They sat on the tarmac in the parked jet for nearly an hour, the cabin lights low, the city glittering beyond the window, and Naomi told him everything. Every name, every shift, every lonely night in a town that wasn't hers. Every time she'd almost called and stopped herself because loving him meant staying gone. He listened the way he had once listened to her explain a stairwell that would have collapsed in 10 years, completely, like the details mattered, because they did. When she finished, he took the ring from the chain around her neck. He held her hand the way he had 2 years ago in the gardens of Litchfield. "So you're always with me," he said, sliding it back onto her finger where it belonged, "even when I'm not." She laughed and cried at the same time, exactly like before, except this time there was nothing underneath it but relief. Outside, Los Angeles glittered on, indifferent and beautiful, the way cities always are when something enormous has just quietly resolved itself in one small parked plane on one runway among hundreds. 2 years of silence, one ring that never left, and a man who had finally stopped searching, because the thing he'd been searching for had been wearing his promise the entire time. If this story moved you, subscribe right now so you never miss what comes next. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the one thing you'd never take off, no matter how far away you had to go? Share this with someone who needs to believe that real love finds its way back. I'll see you in the next one.